Welcome to Payback with Silas. Every day, a new story, lies, betrayal, payback. Let's begin.
They didn't even look me in the eye anymore. After 38 years of service, I had become background noise in the very office I helped build from the ground up. To them, I was just an old chair in the break room, squeaky and outdated, something that needed replacing but no one wanted to deal with. It wasn't always like that. Back in the early days, I was the guy people called when things went sideways. System crash? Call Nolan. Deadline panic? Bring it to Nolan. Hell, even when the CEO's daughter locked herself in the server room by accident, guess who talked her out calmly while redirecting a DDoS attack from Malaysia? Yeah, that was me. But people forget fast. And companies forget faster. 8 days. That's how close I was to crossing the finish line. On July 14th, my pension bonus was scheduled to hit. I'd planned for this day like a man plans his wedding. Every hour logged, every vacation skipped, every late night and missed holiday had led here. That bonus was more than money. It was proof. Proof that loyalty still meant something. Then came the paper. It was a Thursday, somewhere around 4:17 p.m. I remember because I always checked the clock before shutting down my terminal, a habit drilled into me from decades of protocol. My manager, Devin Cray, called me into his office. Devin was half my age and twice as smug, always talking like he read one too many leadership books but never actually led anything in his life. He didn't ask me to sit. Just slid a thin envelope across the desk. "Here's your exit package, Nolan," he said, not even meeting my eyes. "Exit?" I said slowly, as if the word might make more sense the second time. "Effective immediately," he added, folding his arms like he was proud of the decision. "You'll get 2 months severance. If you sign this by tomorrow." I opened the envelope and saw what it was, a voluntary termination agreement. No pension bonus. No thanks. Just a formality. "But the bonus," I said, holding the paper. 8 more days. He smirked. Actually smirked. "Old man," he said. "You think we're gonna cut you a $74,000 check out of nostalgia? No. That bonus is for performers, not retirees. Sign it, or you'll walk with nothing. HR's instructions. Not personal. Not personal." I looked at him. Really looked at him. The kind of look that slices through suits and buzzwords and finds the core of someone. He flinched a little, and that told me everything. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just nodded once, took the envelope, and walked out like my spine was made of steel. Let them think they'd won. Because I only needed one phone call to change everything. I didn't go home that night. I drove. No destination. No plan. Just drove. Past strip malls and neon gas stations, past the bridges and warehouses where this city coughed itself to life every morning. The sun dropped behind the skyline like it was clocking out, and I kept going, past the Beltway, past Logic. I ended up at a 24-hour diner off I-83, somewhere outside Baltimore. Place was called the Sugar Beet, the kind of joint where the coffee's always burnt and the pie tastes like someone's grandma still made it with love and arthritis. I sat at the counter and stared at the paper Devin had given me. The severance agreement was written in cold, clinical legalese, like a death certificate for 38 years of my life. They even had the nerve to leave a blank for the reason for separation. It just said voluntary. Voluntary. Like this was my idea. Like I just woke up one morning and thought, you know what? Forget the bonus. I'd rather leave with nothing but a box of dusty plaques and a pen that doesn't write. I ran my fingers across the edge of the paper, and for a split second, I almost folded. Not because I agreed. Not because they were right. But because I was tired. Tired of fighting uphill. Tired of being talked over in meetings by guys who still called me, sir, but laughed behind my back. Tired of playing by rules written by people who never had to follow them. That's when I remembered him. Augustus Merriweather. Gus. We weren't friends in the traditional sense. More like two men who survived the same storm and came out scarred, but standing. We met 15 years ago during a hellish merger between my company and a small firm out of Philadelphia. Everyone hated each other. It was like corporate trench warfare, passive-aggressive memos, backstabbing, silent meetings. But Gus was different. He was the legal compliance officer for the Philly firm, sharp as a blade and twice as dangerous. He once shut down an entire executive committee for violating age discrimination protocols. Made headlines in the Wall Street Journal. Quiet guy, always in a gray vest. Carried a silver pen and wrote like a poet even in legal briefs. We hadn't spoken in over 5 years. But I still had his number. I pulled out my phone, found his name, Gus M., legal, and stared at the screen. It was 1:12 a.m. I hit dial. He answered on the second ring. Nolan? His voice hadn't changed. Calm, slow, like a man with nowhere to be and all the time in the world to get there. Sorry it's late, I said. If you're calling me after midnight, something's either broken, or about to be. Both, I said. They're trying to screw me out of my pension bonus. 8 days away. Devin Cray pushed a voluntary exit agreement at me today. Told me I either sign by tomorrow or walk with nothing. There was a pause. Not long. But long enough to know he was already mentally unpacking the whole thing. What company policy are they citing? They're not. Just pressure. No official documentation. Just threats and tone. Did you record the conversation? I blinked. No. Shame. But not fatal. They're bluffing. A pension bonus that close to vesting is federally protected under ERISA. Even hinting at forcing a resignation to avoid a payout is borderline criminal if it's tied to age. I sat up straighter. So I have leverage? He laughed, a low, short sound. Nolan, you've got a grenade. They just haven't heard it click yet. He asked me to email him everything, the letter, the timeline, even old emails if I had any that hinted at age-related bias. I did. Devin once joked, in an all-hands meeting that Nolan was still using floppy disks in his mind. Another time he denied me access to a leadership summit because it had a youth focus. By 2 a.m., Gus had everything he needed. At 2:14 a.m., he texted me one line. They picked the wrong old man. By noon the next day, the tone in the building had shifted. I walked into the office not with dread, but with purpose, like a man walking into a courtroom with truth under his arm. Nobody knew yet, of course. They still thought I was dead weight, walking my last lap. But I had already lit the fuse, and it was burning fast. At 8:43 a.m., Gus filed a formal legal notice on my behalf to both the company's HR department and the corporate counsel. He copied the Department of Labor and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. He used phrases like targeted termination within protected window prior to benefit vesting, constructive dismissal with intent to avoid ERISA-triggered payout, pattern of age-related marginalization. By 9:15 a.m., the whispers started. Devin Cray didn't even show up to the office until nearly 10. He burst through the glass doors like a man who just realized the poker game he'd rigged had been flipped. I watched him storm into HR with the letter clutched in his fist. From my desk, which I still occupied by the way, I could see the veins in his neck bulging through the frosted glass. I sipped my coffee and stared out the window, exactly like he did the day he told me I was obsolete. Funny how roles reverse. At 11:07 a.m., I got an email from HR. Subject line: request for clarification regarding exit agreement. They wanted to discuss recent concerns about the termination document. They invited me to a friendly dialogue at 2 p.m. I replied with one sentence. My legal counsel will be attending. By 1:55 p.m., Gus had arrived. He walked into that office like a man with a scalpel in one hand and a loaded file folder in the other. Still in that gray vest. Still carrying that same silver pen. HR looked nervous. Devin looked like someone had tied his tie a little too tight. Gus didn't even sit right away. He opened the file, laid out a printed timeline with highlights and footnotes like it was a murder scene reconstruction. "This is not a misunderstanding," he said, calm and unblinking. "This is a calculated maneuver to deny a long-tenured employee a promised and contractually obligated benefit." HR stammered something about company discretion. Gus leaned forward. "The law doesn't give a damn about discretion. It cares about patterns, language, and motive. You have all three, and every one of them is screaming discrimination." He dropped a thick envelope on the table. "Here's a draft complaint. If Nolan doesn't receive his full pension bonus, along with a public correction of his termination status, we will file this within 72 hours. And when the EOC gets this on their desk, you won't be able to hide behind process errors. You'll be answering subpoenas." I watched the color drain from Devin's face. HR asked if we could step out and give them a moment. We didn't. Gus just smiled. "Take all the time you want. We're not leaving until this man gets what he earned." By 3:36 p.m., it was done. I was handed a new agreement. Not a voluntary resignation this time. No NDA. No good faith severance. It was titled Confirmation of Retirement with Full Benefits and Pension Entitlements. It included the $74,000 bonus and a letter of formal apology. Devin didn't even make eye contact. He just stood by the window, silent. That window he used to stare out of when he thought he was untouchable. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I left the office that day not in shame, not in silence, but in peace. I walked past every face that had looked through me these last few years. I nodded to the interns. I waved at the janitor, Gerald, who always saved the last donut for me on Fridays. And when I hit the parking lot, Gus clapped a hand on my shoulder. "You sure you're ready to retire?" he asked. I looked at the sky, clean and open and blue. "Yeah," I said. But I wasn't ready to be erased. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought I'd sign the new agreement, cash the check, and ride off into the metaphorical sunset, satisfied, vindicated, and finally free. But something strange happened. The silence broke. It started the next morning. I was packing up the last few things from my office: photos, a pair of noise-canceling headphones I never got to use, a desk drawer full of half-dead pens and ancient sticky notes, when Jenna, one of the junior developers, tapped lightly on my doorframe. She looked nervous, like a kid asking a retired general for war advice. "I just wanted to say," she said, "thank you for standing up to them." I raised an eyebrow. "To HR?" She shook her head. "To all of them. Devin. The culture. The whole machine. What they did to you, that wasn't just you. It's happened to others too. They just didn't have a Gus. Or the guts." She hesitated, then added, "There's an older woman in data analysis, Doris. They told her her job was being outsourced, but kept it internal and gave it to a 24-year-old contractor a week later." That name hit me like a punch in the ribs. Doris had been there even longer than me. She was quiet, kind. Brought in banana bread every second Monday, and still typed faster than anyone on her team. I hadn't seen her in weeks. I just assumed she'd retired. I should have asked. By the end of that day, I had 6 emails from different employees. People I barely knew. Some were young, some close to retirement. Each one had their own story. Frank, who was removed from a leadership training program after his manager told him he was too experienced to need further growth. Eleanor, who wasn't promoted because they needed someone with a fresh perspective, which was code for someone younger, cheaper, and easier to manipulate. James, who had been told not to apply for a higher role because, at his age, maybe it's time to think about mentoring instead of climbing. These weren't complaints. These were confessions. They were people who had been gaslit so thoroughly they weren't even sure they'd been wrong, until someone else said, "No. This is not okay." Gus called me that evening. He was already 2 steps ahead, of course. "I've had 4 other employees from your company reach out to my office," he said. Separate cases. All pointing in the same direction. Systemic age bias. It's looking more and more like a culture, not a fluke. I stared at the retirement letter sitting on my kitchen table. It felt heavier now. Not just mine, ours. Do you think they'll change? I asked. He was quiet for a moment. Then, not until someone forces them to. And that's when it hit me. Retirement wasn't an ending. Not for me. It was leverage. The following week, I wrote an open letter. I published it on my LinkedIn. Titled it, 8 Days from Dignity, What Corporate America Needs to Learn About Loyalty. It didn't name the company directly. I didn't need to. People knew. The story had already spread. The how was less important than the why. In the letter, I wrote about how easy it is to become invisible, not because you stop contributing, but because you've been around long enough to make others uncomfortable. How success and loyalty can turn into liabilities in places where insecurity sits in the corner office. I didn't rant. I didn't accuse. I told the truth, quietly and clearly. The post went viral within 3 days. 125,000 likes. 34,000 shares. Hundreds of comments. Some were from people I hadn't seen in 20 years. Others from strangers across the country. But the message was the same. This happened to me too. By the time the company realized the damage, it was too late to contain. They released a generic PR statement about reevaluating internal policies and strengthening inclusion. But the world had already seen behind the curtain. And back in the office, the real change began. An internal review was launched. HR policies were rewritten. An anonymous reporting system was implemented. And Devin Cray? He was transitioned out of his role within the month. No send-off. No applause. Just a memo. I didn't ask for a revolution. I just refused to sign a lie. But sometimes that's all it takes. It took me a few weeks to slow down. Retirement isn't an off switch, it's more like a dimmer. You go from full-speed calendars and fluorescent lights to slow mornings and sunlight filtering through kitchen windows. For the first few days, I still woke up at 6:30 a.m., still checked my inbox out of habit, still reached for a badge that no longer hung on my belt. It felt like I'd stepped off a moving train and the world had kept going without me. But then, the quiet started to feel like freedom, not absence. I spent my mornings walking along the water down by the harbor. Baltimore was different at that hour, less noise, more sky. I started bringing a little notebook with me. I'd sit on a bench near the old ships and scribble thoughts, memories, names of people I hadn't thought of in years. It wasn't a journal. It was more like a ledger of things I didn't want to forget. One morning I ran into Gerald, the janitor from the office. He was walking with his grandson. He recognized me instantly. "You're that guy," he said. "The one who didn't take their crap." I laughed. "That's one way to put it." He shook my hand. It meant something. To people like me. People who don't always get to say no. That stuck with me. Because that's the thing no one tells you. When you stand your ground, you're not just holding the line for yourself, you're doing it for everyone who's too scared, too tired, too alone to believe they can. About a month later, I got a letter. Actual mail. Heavy envelope, gold embossed logo. It was from the company. Inside was a note, no more than 5 lines, from the new interim CEO. "Mr. Beckett. On behalf of the board, I'd like to apologize personally for how your departure was handled. We are reviewing all previous retirement cases from the last 5 years and are adjusting bonuses and statuses accordingly. Your voice was heard, and it mattered. With respect, Talia Cresswell." And folded behind it was a printed spreadsheet. Names. Dates. Adjusted payout amounts. They were correcting history. I sat there holding the letter like it might evaporate if I blinked. I didn't need the apology. I didn't expect justice. But somehow, without a courtroom, without headlines, without even raising my voice, it came. I still keep in touch with Gus. We grab lunch once a month now, usually some hole-in-the-wall diner where the coffee's strong and the food comes in paper baskets. He says my case opened the door for 2 new investigations. One of them is going federal. Jenna messaged me last week. She got promoted. She said the new manager actually listens. She's staying for now, but she's also interviewing elsewhere. Just to see what it feels like to be wanted, she said. And me? I finally fixed up the old bike in my garage. Bought in '92, hadn't been ridden in over a decade. Now I ride it every Saturday through Druid Hill Park. It creaks, just like I do. But it still goes. People think legacy is something you leave behind in buildings or job titles. It's not. Legacy is what echoes after you say, enough. It's a quiet janitor remembering your name. It's a young developer walking taller. It's a company rewriting the rules not because they wanted to, but because someone made them. They tried to end my story in a footnote. I rewrote it in bold. 8 days from dignity? No. Exactly on time.